Rise, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Views from the Center. I'm your host, Ryan Brinker. It seems only fair that I begin this week's broadcast with some explanations and apologies. It has been an inexcusably long time since I last released a podcast. There are logistical reasons for this, but I won't bore you with them. Long story short, I had some changes I wanted to make, but I was unable to make them work. The reasons that I will talk about regarding my long absence can be described as my own personal political rebirth in a manner of speaking. I've been challenging a lot of my own preconceived political notions as of late, and while I think that sort of self-skepticism is imperative to keep one's mind sharp and academic, it's left me fairly angry about politics and, frankly, most everything about how I used to see the world. Without getting into too much detail, let's just say my politics have taken a serious turn into unexpected territory. While this is a good thing in my opinion, it has left me somewhat politically grumpy as of late. For instance, I've been sitting on a podcast for some time now all about identity politics. The script is needlessly mean and condescending and wouldn't serve the purpose of fostering discussion. While I think that the topic of identity politics is exactly the sort of thing that this show was made to discuss, and rest assured I will discuss it at some point, I don't want to discuss it in that way, and so I will shelve it for now. Instead, I'd like to discuss two topics that aren't exactly political, but that inform the politics of our time. Namely, a person's capacity to commit evil acts, in addition to, more broadly, why we think the way we do, and the way we can become more strong in the face of these evils. To give credit where it's due, I'd like to take this opportunity to note that much of this broadcast has been inspired by University of Toronto professor Jordan B. Peterson, and if you're interested in further exploration into these topics, I suggest looking into his work, specifically his course titled Maps and Meanings. I have linked his YouTube channel in the description below. With introductions completed, let's jump into the first part of the lesson. When people look back on the history of mankind, it is seemingly both with a sense of horror and relief. The horror comes from an understanding of the horrible, grisly violence that people are willing to visit upon one another for seemingly any reason at all. It is nearly impossible, frankly, to study the history of our species without this ugliness becoming abundantly clear. Meanwhile, the relief comes from a sense that we're better off now. Simply put, those who came before us were wrong, but that's okay because we know better now. While that's undoubtedly true for a lot of things, it isn't as true as we think it is, and even if it were, that isn't especially comforting. When reviewing a time in history like American slavery, for instance, it's easy to think to oneself, oh, those slave owners were evil people. They were immoral and barbaric, and I'm so glad we've come as far as we have since then. That's a fair thought, but it ignores one fundamental and horrifying truth. Slave owners during the time of slavery were not evil. There was nothing immoral, unreasonable, psychotic, sadistic, or otherwise evil about them. They were average for the time. Let's think about what that means. I want you to consider something pretty scary, but also pretty difficult to deny. If you or I would have been born to a rich white farming family in South Carolina in 1820, we would have been slave owners. We would have taken other human beings as property and not given it a second thought. If you or I had been 18-year-old Aryan men in Germany in 1938, we would have been Nazis. If given the chance to be a guard at Auschwitz, we would have done it, and we would have been happy to have the opportunity. If you or I had been a peasant in Russia during the revolution of 1917, we would have been communists. We would have joined in and decapitated the rich among us, and we would have done it all the while believing we were making the world a better place. The common thread is this: the people throughout history who have committed horrible, unthinkable crimes against humanity were not evil. They were average, regular people, and you and I are no different. That's a pretty fucking scary thing to say, right? It's among the most uncomfortable headspaces a person can occupy. For that reason, people rarely occupy it. We think to ourselves often that we would have been the hero to set things right. We would have been the abolitionists. We would have led the revolution against Adolf Hitler. But 99.9% of us wouldn't, and the proof of that is that 99.9% of us didn't at the time. We can't all be that special. The simple, awful truth is this: the capacity to commit evil on a scale unimaginable to any of us lives within us all. It is within you, it is within me. So you may be asking yourself right now, why even bother thinking about something this uncomfortable? What does it accomplish? The answer lies in how we behave ourselves once we understand the realities of evil in this way. All people need in order to commit atrocity is a spark, one simple push in the wrong direction. This can come in the form of a political ideology like Nazism, communism, fascism, etc., or any kind of radical philosophy like collectivist identity movements or religious cults. The formula could not be more simple. People plus extremist ideas equals mass suffering. History reflects this en masse. So then, what is to be done about extremist ideas? perhaps it's not what you think. One could be forgiven for following this logic and thinking to themselves at this point, wow, from everything Ryan has said so far, he must be in favor of banning things like the Confederate flag, the swastika, the hammer and sickle. That could not be further from the solution in my view. Radical ideologies fester and grow underground. Banning or censoring an idea doesn't make it go away, it makes it stronger. It makes it the counterculture. It makes the idea that you despise the underdog in a fight against censorship. If there is one constant throughout human history, it is this: prohibition does not solve the problem. It makes things significantly worse. Once you become the censor, you lose all moral authority, and with that, you lose the fight. The answer lies within the phrase that I have already used once in this program, the marketplace of ideas. Simply put, bad ideas must be allowed to compete with good ones. Every idea, no matter how reprehensible, is allowed to compete for the spotlight. The bad ones, as per the rules of the market, will be eliminated. No one will take them seriously, and they will fade away. This is the ideal defense against evil ideas in American society. Expose them loudly and for what they are. This might seem like common knowledge, but I would encourage my friends on the left to consider this the next time they see an article about a college or club trying to ban so-called offensive imagery. Even if you're right, even if the object of your ire is patently and objectively offensive, censoring it makes it stronger. There is no exception to that rule. Coupling that with the understanding that every person is potentially one strong evil idea away from global catastrophe, we should really be careful with how we deal with evil ideas. For the second part of the podcast, I'd like to continue the theme of harmful ideas and discuss how they should be dealt with on an individual level. For lack of a better term, we will be looking at offensive content and how one should approach it. This is unfortunately yet again pretty standard fare. People say or write hurtful things, people try to censor them, people like me feel like assholes for siding with the guy holding the God hates fags sign. We know how it goes at this point. So for the sake of variety, I'd rather discuss how to deal with offensive content in a constructive and positive way. I'm going to need some low-hanging fruit for this, so let's discuss the whole safe space thing. We were always going to get to it eventually. For anyone out there who doesn't know what a safe space is in this context, here's a brief explanation. A safe space is a designated space, be it online, physical, etc., that is meant to be safe for members of marginalized groups. This safety mentality extends to safety for ideas as well as physical safety. Here's the scenario. A group feels that they want to discuss an issue concerning the black community, but they don't want to allow anyone to say anything they consider offensive or belittling. By the way, if you, like me, are free speech centric, your ears should have perked up at that last sentence. In order to establish these rules, they declare their meeting a safe space. The logic behind this checks out at first glance. People don't like mean things, so let's make a place without mean things. However, unfortunately, this falls apart almost immediately under minimal scrutiny once you realize that you have to elect someone within the group to define what the fuck constitutes a quote-unquote mean thing. That definition, by the way, is extremely unlikely to be even close to the same for every member of that chosen group. I could go on, but that's not what we're here to talk about. The question at hand here is it a good idea to shelter people from things they are afraid of or upset by? That is, after all, the point of safe spaces. In my opinion, this is the opposite of helpful. Here's another scenario. There's a person who has terrible social anxiety. He has a hard time meeting new people or starting conversations. What would you suggest is the solution to his problem? Is it A, reassure this person that he never has to meet another person again if he doesn't want to, actively work to change the entirety of society's norms in order to make him feel more comfortable, and decry anyone who doesn't participate as insensitive and socially privileged, or B, help him learn to be more social? Hard choice, right? This is a well-known dichotomy in psychology. You can't make the horrors of the world smaller, you can only make yourself braver, and the only way to become braver is to attack and defeat head-on the thing that upsets you. If you're upset by offensive words, you will never be able to ensure that you never hear them. You will, however, be able to ensure that you grow a thicker skin and don't let those words bother you anymore. That seems a little mean, so I'll back up. Let me clarify. I am not justifying in any way people's outward attempts to offend and abuse. People who wave Confederate flags and shout the N-word are complete and total scumbags, and I have no love for them whatsoever. All I mean to say here is that it's impossible and frankly harmful to make yourself believe that you can be insulated from the harsh aspects of the world around you. You need to be able to deal with them, and sheltering yourself from them is the worst way to do that. In the end, everything comes down to choice. You can plug your ears and pretend the things you don't like aren't happening, or you can harden your heart and ensure that they can never harm you. I'll leave with this thought. If we as a country are going to have a discussion about where and when it's okay to have Confederate memorabilia displayed, those who say it's never okay are going to have to see and hear a lot of things before that fight is over. You're not doing yourself any favors by trigger warning yourself into weakness. With that in mind, what do you all think of this? How do these topics affect how you see politics? Leave me a comment or send me a tweet at Views from Center. Until next time, this has been Views from the Center. Thank you for listening.